All right, thanks for joining me here. This is Appraisals 101, the top 10 things that you need to know. I'm Chris Young with the Mortgage Company, and let's dive in. So, first thing here we want to talk about is the UCDP. Now, we'll start with a quick story. Last year, there were an unusually high number of appraisals that were coming in low. Our company started to investigate, figure out what was going on, and part of the issue was that appraisal values were being driven up due to multiple offer situations, and obviously we couldn't get the numbers to work. But the other problem was this software, this UCDP that Fannie Mae rolled out. So take it back even further. Back in the 80s and 90s, there used to be actual people underwriting files. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac did the same thing. They introduced a software called DU, Desktop Underwriter, because Fannie thought it was more accurate and less subjective to have a computer look at it than an actual person. So they decided to apply this concept to appraisals. And last September, they rolled out this software. Now everything we do has to be uploaded to this software and scored. So think of this as a report card for the appraisal. They come back, the appraiser does the appraisal, they give it to us, we upload it, and then it tells them whether or not they did a good job. As scary as that is, there's an actual computer grading the actual person. So this uses data from 13 million appraisals since 1978, MLS data, county records, and some third-party data as well. So every appraisal is loaded into this UCDP and scored. Every line item of every appraisal is reviewed and compared to historical data, and they do this to ensure the integrity and the quality of the file. Basically, they want to make sure that the data lines up. If we're saying it's a four-bedroom home in the current appraisal, but the last two appraisals that were done on that property say a two or a three-bedroom home, there's some red flags, and they caught it. That's what they want to do. So this is what an actual report looks like. We've blacked out the name and the address there, but this is what we get back, or part of it at least. This is the other part, the score. So this will tell us the score, and it'll tell us why it scored the way that it did. So an actual example of a file we had, this appraisal came in at value, okay? We uploaded it to the software, and it required the appraiser to modify and make some adjustments. So the software identified that he used three-bedroom comps, and he made adjustments to those comps instead of using other two-bedrooms that were in the area. So we had to go back, ask him to find some more two-bedroom comps, which he did, but that impacted the value. So this is what we're dealing with. This is what the appraisers are dealing with. That doesn't always happen. It's an extreme scenario where they come back and make us use totally different comps that kill the value, but it can happen. So bottom line, when you get a low appraisal in, it might not be the appraiser's fault. It's not the lender's fault. They have to get their score to be an acceptable level. They're dealing with this issue on the back end more than you realize. So there are three issues here at work. There's the bidding war that people seem to be going into, driving prices above market value. There is the software that is regulating everything. Now appraisers are being more cautious than ever to make sure that they're getting a good score. Again, they don't want to get a bad score and get kicked off the list. And the way that the scoring system works, it's 1 to 5. Anything under 2.5 is considered acceptable. Anything over 2.5 is actually considered not acceptable. Now that doesn't mean that we can't give a loan to Fannie Mae if it's over 2.5, but we better have some darn good data to back ourselves up as to why we got the score we did and why we thought it was acceptable to send it in. So the primary goal of the system is to prevent fraud and ensure the integrity of the appraisal. The secondary goal is a long way away, but it is to remove humans from the equation at some point in the future. Again, it's not going to happen in the next 5 years, but they do plan to get rid of people and really make it more computerized. Yay for everyone involved there. All right, so the HVCC, let's talk about that. The Home Valuation Code of Conduct. This was adopted in October of 2010, and it prohibits basically influencing the appraiser to get the value that you want, is how we'll say it. We still get to pick local appraisers. Believe it or not, a lot of big banks, and a lot of banks in general, took a conservative approach using AMCs or appraisal management companies, where they don't get involved in the appraisal at all. They hire a third-party company, and they have nothing to do with it. Now, we took a different approach, which is, I think, a good thing. We have a division within our company which is allowed to talk with the appraisers. So again, we're a little bit more hands-on than a lot of places you're going to go to. Again, we still pick the appraisers. We have local appraisers that you know, but we do need to have a rotation and a fair distribution. We can't send all of our stuff to the same guy. This law is not designed to prevent or block the lender from discussing or reviewing an appraisal, uh, but it is if we try to influence the outcome of that, we're breaking the law. So a few examples of what we can't do. We can't order a new appraisal if we don't like the one that we received. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. We can't go and tell the appraiser that they're not going to get more business if they don't give us the value we want. That would be awesome, but again, can't do it. And we can't use the same appraiser for all of our business. We have to spread it out. So there's, again, less chance that we're actually going to be cheating the system somehow. Now, so going back to local appraisers, to us, that's very important. So depending on the area that you're in, that you're watching this, we're going to use appraisers from that area. So our main office is, and we do a lot of our business here in the Lehigh Valley. So we have 10, I believe it's actually 15 at this point, local appraisers on our rotation that we use. They're all from within a certain radius of this area. They're not coming from Philly, from central Pennsylvania. They're local appraisers who know the market. They live next to you. They're your neighbor. The only time we use people out of the area is if you have a property out of the area. If we're talking, you've got a property in, so let's say somewhere in New Jersey, we work there as well, we're going to get a local appraiser to that area. What most banks do is they use that third-party appraisal management company who, what do you think they do? They go and find the cheapest appraisers out there. Doesn't matter where they live. They're going to get the person who gives them the lowest bid. They could be out of state, out of area. They don't really care. So that's a little bit different approach that we've taken. We are going to pay these local appraisers to do these local appraisals for us. All right. Next thing let's go through is the anatomy of an appraisal. Now, I'm not going to go through line by line. I'm actually going to have this as a handout, or I guess a download that you could download this and take a look at your own convenience here. But this basically breaks down every piece of this appraisal. A, it's color coded over here. B, you can go through and see what every part means. Okay. But I will include a link or attach these somehow so you can download it and get the full effect, just like if you were in the classroom. This is page 2. So again, we have 2 full pages here. And this is an appraisal report checklist. There is a checklist for appraisers that they go through to make sure that they didn't miss anything. We've modified this for you, so you can go through after you're saying when you're listing a property or walking through with your buyer. You can do the same concept. It's not this one that you see here, but you can have the same concept for yourself to make sure that you're not going to have any issues down the road. All right, so determining value. How do we do that? What are the most important factors to determine value? And this is actually according to the different appraisers that we interviewed. We interviewed appraisers and asked them, how do you do your job? What makes the difference here? How does this work? And this is what they told us. So let's start here with these 4 things. Comparable sold properties in the past 6 months. Try to get it into the same neighborhood. We want similar in style and features. So if you have a ranch home, you're not going to compare it to a 2-story colonial. If you've got a colonial, you're not going to compare it to a bi-level. That's common sense, but again, that's where they start. And the gross living area. Gross living area is anything above grade on all 4 sides. There seems to be a slight discrepancy. Some appraisers look at it a little bit different than others. But bottom line, if you've got a ranch home with a finished basement, that's not 2 levels of gross living area. They're going to count that as 1 level, say 1,500 square feet, and they're going to give you another 1,000 square feet of finished basement, but it's not quite the same as getting 2 full floors of finished space. If you have a bi-level with no dirt around the edges, with no, it's not below grade whatsoever, again, you typically would get that counted as gross living area, but it all depends on that appraiser. So anyway, we start there, and then they make adjustments. So adjustments are subjective. And I know you guys would you love to hear that here, but they vary between different appraisers. We could not tie any single appraiser down and have them tell us exactly what their adjustments were. I don't say they don't know, but it depends on the property, depends on the situation, and quite honestly, I think it depends on the number they're trying to get you. If they try to get a certain number for you, they might give you a little bit more than they would if somebody else. It's a very subjective thing, but there are 3 rules that they need to stay within. So rule number 1, the individual line adjustment. Over here, let's say that you have more acreage or you have more bedrooms. The individual line adjustment can't exceed 10% of the sales price, okay? The net adjustment, rule number 2 that they have to follow is the net adjustment may not exceed 15% of the comparable sale price. So again, you see down here, net adjustment, that has to be within 15%. Then you've got the total gross adjustment. That is the how many adjustments you made total. So like in this scenario, you've got 7,000 minus 10 plus 4,400. Add all of those up regardless of plus or minus. You got 17, 23. You just keep adding those up, and you have to look at the total gross. That has to be below 25%. Okay? So the UDCP scorecard will identify any adjustments that are not within the normal range, and it requires the appraiser to comment, or ideally they want them to adjust those adjustments to make it fit. All right, so this is a slide that we'll love going through here. Multiple offers. I get asked a lot, well, we're selling over list price. Why can't we make an adjustment for the appraisal because of this market that we're in? We're in a market where everything's going up, everything's appreciating, people are bidding over asking price. Shouldn't they take that into consideration when determining the value? Personal opinion, yes, they should. Unfortunately, back in 2009, Fannie Mae said no more adjustments for appreciation. There was they intentionally try to slow or limit the appreciation here. They don't want bubbles. They don't want what happened back in the early 2000s, leading up to 2006 and 7, to happen again. They do allow it. They do allow appreciation. Obviously, there's other ways to get this to happen, but again, they're not going to just say, "Oh, add 10% because of a good market." Can't do that anymore. All right, next slide here. The final value. A lot of people are confused as to how this works, but the final value is not the average of those three comps. The appraiser can use a single comp as their best comparable that they feel, or they have a software that will actually give them a weighted average. So it'll say, okay, let's use 35% of this one, 35% of that one, and we'll use the additional 30% for this one over here. And it does the math and figures out what the number would be. Or again, as you see here, if you take this, you add all these up, 96, 89, 96 divided by 3 equals 93,000. Well, the appraiser didn't want to do that. They figured over here, let's say this is the best comp. We're going to use that, call it 96 grand as the value. So the appraiser makes a value determination based on the weighted average or their own opinion. Technically, the comparable with the least adjustments should have the highest weighted average, or be the one that they actually end up using. And at least 2 of the 3 comparables need to be of equal or higher value than the appraised value of your property. You don't want 2 properties or 3 properties coming in below and adjusting up. They don't want to see that. All right, so what to do if it doesn't appraise? That's a great question. First thing we're going to do is review the appraiser's reconciliation section, and we're going to try to understand how they determined the value. Myself, as a loan officer, we're going to review the appraisal for accuracy and determine if there's any blatant errors, but in reality, there's probably not. That UCDP would have picked it up for us. We're going to ask you as the agent, are there any better comparables that you can find us? Are there any more recent sales that the appraiser might have missed? Any for sale by owner properties? Again, check around. Don't just look at the MLS. Let's see if there's anything out there that didn't sell on the MLS that we can use. And then the lender, we're going to have a conversation with the appraiser to see if there's anything that they can suggest we do to meet the value. Again, we can't influence them in any way, but we can ask them, what is there that we can do? Do we have any options here for us to get this value changed? Now, again, the HVCC Act may prohibit changing the appraised value or ordering a new appraisal, and the UCDP software may prohibit making adjustments that are outside of software limitations. So we still have our hands tied a little bit, but it doesn't mean we can't fight it, we can't dispute it, and try to get the value changed. Best thing I can say is get us some comps, get us better comps is the biggest advice that I would give. All right, so let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Enough of Fannie Mae and the UCDP. Let's talk about inspections. I get this a lot. People want to know what's required for which specific program. So first thing, we're going to look at, let's say, FHA. There's no required inspections. Conventional, there's no required inspections. Everybody knows that. VA requires the termite and well. If there is a well on the property, they require termite and well. USDA requires termite if it's checked on the agreement of sale. If it's not checked on the agreement of sale, they're not going to ask for it. Again, they also require the well tested. And then PHFA, regardless of if you go PHFA with a conventional, VA, US, it doesn't matter. PHFA will require a termite and a well inspection as well. So the one thing here to mention, all of these government programs have distance guidelines between the well and septic. The well and septic have to be 100 feet apart, with an exception that you can go down to 75 feet if the township permits it. Now, if an appraiser comments on any issues that he sees for any of the loan products, conventional included, they may call for more investigation. So, again, if the appraiser calls for it, they might want to find out more. But nothing we can do about that. That is, unfortunately, just, again, appraiser discretion. So, some more important stuff here about inspections. And this only applies if the agency, say FHA, we'll call it, requires it. So if there's an inspection on the agreement of sale, and the inspection reveals damage, and then you, for some reason, send that to me, we can't ignore it if we see it. Okay. So if the inspection is listed on the agreement of sale, let's just say there's a termite inspection listed. You're doing an FHA loan which does not require a termite inspection, and the inspection reveals damage or active termites, and then you go and send it to us. We now know about it. So at that point, even if you decide down the road that you don't care about it and you're going to handle it after closing, that's where it becomes a problem. We can't unring the bell and pretend we don't know about it. At that point, we are now aware of an issue with the property, and we are going to require that the issue be taken care of. So to kind of make it simple, there's 3 ways that we get involved. It's number 1, if an inspection is required by FHA, USDA, whatever it is, obviously we're involved then. If an appraiser makes note of something, we have to get involved at that point. Or the third is if the agent or the buyer, again, for some reason, let us know. If you don't get what I'm saying there, try not to let us know about inspections as little as possible. That doesn't help anybody's cause. Okay, so condos and PUDs, or planned unit developments, a lot of people at HOAs. So if it has an association, it has to be evaluated. Okay, FHA and VA has an approved list. So FHA has an approved list. You're on it or you're not. There's a lot of paperwork. It's a big hassle. Many associations have been letting them expire and not re-upping because it costs a lot of money and they just don't want to deal with it. VA is similar. It's a totally different list that you have to get on. Just because you're on FHA doesn't mean that you're on the VA list, but it's same concept there. Same thing. It does expire. You have to renew it every so often. Now, USDA is weird. USDA can, if a community is approved for FHA, USDA can use those guidelines. If it's not approved FHA but it's approved VA, you can still do a USDA loan and it just follows the VA guidelines. If it's not approved FHA or VA, you're not dead in the water. You can actually follow conventional guidelines, which are over here, and you can do a spot review, like a full review on the spot. Okay, so this is conventional and USDA we're going to put over in this category. The association has to be well capitalized. They've got to have money in reserves. There can't be more than 51% investors. So if you've got 100 units and 51 of those units are owned by investors, you're going to have a hard time. The owners need to be in control of the association. What that means is they can't still be owned by the builder who's still building units. It has to be turned over to the actual association. You can't have more than 10% of the units owned by the same person. You can't have more than 15% of the units delinquent on their HOA dues. There can't be any commercial influence. You can't have a strip mall right in the middle of your condo or whatever. It doesn't happen a lot, but again, it's something here. The association needs to be bonded and insured. All amenities need to be complete. There can't be a swimming pool that's halfway completed. They're not going to loan on it. And there can't be any outstanding judgments or liens on the property or on the association. So let's touch on repairs. What's the difference between FHA and conventional? In reality, not a whole lot. A lot of people think that conventional is just going to let you do whatever you want. There's no, you don't need, basically, you're not going to have any problems. And that's not true anymore. So 10 to 15 years ago, FHA and conventional were much different. FHA was a lot more strict and they called for more repairs, but turns out FHA wanted to get out of the inspection business, so they kind of backed it off. They still pick on peeling paint. They still pick on handrails, mold, stuff like that, broken glass, exposed electrical wires. There are still issues that FHA will pick on. It's more safety related. But if you've ever seen, that's why they put these big things, there's no warranty. HUD does not warranty the properties. Get a home inspection. That's why they're doing it. They don't want to be held liable because people were thinking that their appraisals were home inspections, which isn't the case. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, conventional used to be very lax. They used to not call for anything. So if you have that in your head, yeah, it used to happen. You could just get a house and it could be a piece of garbage and nobody seemed to care. It's not the case anymore. They will still call for some repairs. Basically, health and safety issues, all utilities must be functioning. A big thing here that a lot of people overlook, if it's believed to create an expense for the new buyer. So if the new buyer is going to have to come in the house and then replace a $10,000 heating system, again, that's a problem. They're going to assume that you don't have money to buy the home, make your payments, and now put this new heating system in. And all appliances must function. That stove is usually the general rule of thumb. The stove has to work, but if there's other things in there, the appraiser at their discretion may call for them to work as well. So, one other thing I want to mention, FHA does require the central air conditioning to work. Even though it's not considered a feature that is needed, you could have a house without central air. If you have central air, FHA is going to require that to work as well. So, just an FYI. All right, let's talk about some other stuff. No particular rhyme or reason to this slide here, just a bunch of stuff thrown together, but let's start with private roads and maintenance agreements. So, all properties must have access to the house via an easement. There's a big misunderstanding though about private maintenance agreements. FHA only requires this if there's a noticeable issue with the road or access to the property. The general rule of thumb is if you think you can drive a car on it, you're probably fine. Some other banks have overlays and they might require maintenance agreements, but again, Fannie Mae does not, we do not. That is an overlay if there is anything. Some red flags to look for here for zoning and units. Let's touch on that. Red flags would be if it looks like it could be used as a commercial property. That might be an issue. 25% or less, I believe it is, has to be used for commercial. So it has to be residential, 1 to 4 units. And again, pretty much you don't want to have a storefront. A parking lot is probably going to kill the deal. Houses don't have parking lots. Commercial properties do. So a parking lot is a big red flag there as well. All right, mobile homes and manufactured homes. These are my favorite. And if you don't sense the sarcasm there, I feel sorry for you. But mobile homes are allowed. They must be double wide. We can't do single wides in a trailer park. It's not possible. It has to be affixed to the property has to be affixed to a foundation for it to become real estate. The VIN number has to be surrendered back to the state. And again, that's what makes it real estate. It's no longer a vehicle. The wheels removed. It's attached to a foundation, which is on a piece of land that you own. It's now real estate. Another thing here, it has to be built after 1975. I don't know if the quality of construction changed, what the ruling is there, why it is, but anything before 75, again, you're going to have a really hard time. Most people will not be able to loan on that, ourselves included. But after 1975, you might be okay. The other thing here that might be difficult is you have to find similar comps. And that means you can't find 3 brick ranch properties that are the same square footage because that's not really a good comp. They're going to want to find at least one other mobile home on a foundation that they can use and compare it against. So you don't need all 3 mobile homes, but you're going to need at least one. And as far as manufactured homes go, manufactured homes aren't really that much different. If we're talking manufactured as in a fabricated in a factory, brought here in sections, put together, it's still built with your typical 2x4s, 2x6s even. I mean, it's a normal house, it's just where it's built. Mobile, the difference here, mobile is literally a trailer that was brought here on wheels. Or it could have been. And you can tell the difference a lot of times. The ceilings are sloped, the walls are thinner. You typically can tell the difference between the two. So let's move on here. Flips, deeds, and agreement of sale. So FHA does require, you've heard of the 90-day rule. They do require within 90 days 2 appraisals. So conventional does not require any appraisals unless the UCDP score, I'm sorry, I'm messing up here. Hold on. Okay, so next thing we'll talk about here, this is some random other stuff, as the title suggests. So you've got private roads and maintenance agreement. So the big misconception here that a lot of people think is that every property needs a maintenance agreement for FHA. They only require it if there's a noticeable issue with the road or access to the property. The general rule of thumb is if you can drive a car on it, you're probably fine. Now, that being said, some banks do have an overlay which they will require the maintenance agreement, but Fannie Mae and ourselves, we do not have any requirement there for a maintenance agreement. If one thing they do have to have though is access, meaning you need to have an easement. There has to be something recorded and in writing that shows there is access to the property. So let's dive into zoning and units. Properties need to be considered residential. They have to be 1 to 4 units, and if it looks like it could be used for commercial, there may be a red flag. Um, it's it is subjective. Again, I love that word. But if there's too much commercial influence, such as there's a storefront, there's a big sign, there's a parking lot is a big issue, believe it or not, it probably isn't going to work. So next thing here, mobile and manufactured homes. My favorite. So manufactured homes are generally okay. They're actually regular houses that are just built in a factory and assembled on site rather than, bringing all the lumber to the site and building on the spot. So uh, manufactured homes are completely fine, but mobile homes are where you really have the problem. Now, some lenders can't do them at all. I don't know if I want to admit this or not, but we can do mobile homes. Uh, there's some limitations though. So it has to be a double wide. It can't be a single wide. It needs to be a double wide mobile home. It does need to be affixed to the property, attached to the foundation, and that to become real estate. So you need the wheels off, attached to a foundation, and on a piece of property that you physically own. The VIN number has to be surrendered to the state. That's what takes it from being a vehicle and turns it into real estate. Also, it has to be built after 1975. For some reason, I guess the regulations on how these things were built changed around that time. So anything after 1975 would be okay. Anything before is a no-go. And the final caveat here, which applies to the appraisal seminar, is you have to find similar comps, including at least one other mobile home. You can't use a brick ranch home for all 3 of your comps and expect that to be the same thing. Let's be honest, it's not. A brick ranch and a mobile home on a foundation are completely different, so you need at least one other mobile home as a comparable property. So flips, deeds, and the agreement of sale. So FHA does have the 90-day rule. It has to be 90-day period between when the deed is recorded from the previous seller to when the new agreement of sale is written and dated. So there's no way around that, unfortunately. They do require 2 appraisals for flips, and conventional, though, does not. You require the one traditional appraisal regardless of how long it's been in between owners, unless the UCDP score is higher than 2.5. So if it's bad, if it's higher than 2.5, Fannie Mae could come back and require a second appraisal to be done, and they'll take the lower of the 2. So one thing, again, as I mentioned, to be safe, FHA, that 90-day rule, I'm going to say the clock starts from the date that the previous deed was recorded. Some people are going to argue that the 90-day clock could start from the date that they've signed the deed, that everybody, basically from the last closing. Again, as an example, if you close on December 15th, but the deed isn't recorded until December 28th, what's the correct date? I don't know. Nobody seems to know. It's been a discrepancy. We've gotten it done before on the December 15th date, but it's not a guarantee. It depends on, again, it's subjective. There we go. There's that word again. But to be safe, let's say that clock starts from the date that the deed is recorded, not the date of closing previously. And we need the agreement of sale signed. Last thing here on this slide, we need the agreement of sale signed before we can order the appraisal. You can't give us an appraisal or an agreement of sale that's got one signature on it from the buyer and not the seller. We can't do anything with that. In order to order an appraisal, we need both parties to sign. It has to be fully executed. And the last thing, personal property. Personal items cannot be part of the agreement of sale, or they really shouldn't be. Don't include the classic car, the John Deere tractor. Again, you can't finance personal property into a 30-year real estate loan. It doesn't work. If you want to draw up a bill of sale on the side for $1 and you want to give that person the John Deere for $1, I don't care. We don't know anything about it, but you can't put that in the agreement of sale. To be safe, don't do it. Anything that is in the agreement of sale, like bar stools or whatever, make sure it says at zero value. Typically, things like the washer, dryer, fridge, that's all fine. Just make sure that you don't put anything specific in there. Again, you want the John Deere tractor. And Beware of properties that are next to, I'm going to call them just, you know, uh, black flags here. Not even red flags, black flags. Like yeah, if it's next to a sewage plant, hazardous waste site, or some kind of dump, that's a problem. If it's FHA, it can't be next to a gas station. There's a lot of weird rules out there, but use common sense. If the property is located next to something that could be hazardous or it could be just difficult to sell the property in the future, if it looks like it'll impact the value of the home, it might cause a red flag here. The appraiser says something and it's not financeable. Not always, but it is definitely possible. So that is actually everything, guys. Thanks for watching here. Hope you learned some stuff. If you want more details or more information on anything that we discussed, I'm more than happy to come out to your office or meet you at Panera, whatever, and more than happy to talk through some of these things with you personally. If you need anything, you have any questions, I'm always around. Give me a call at 484-903-9090 or hit me up on email, cyoung@themtgco.com. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.